Hello everyone. In the last video, we have seen that what is domain name server. For any device for communication, it requires two things. What are those? One is IP address and one is host name. What is IP address? It is a internet protocol. It is a unique identifier for a device. Then what is host name? It is the name of the server. Similarly, here also to access any website browser require two things. What are those? IP address and host name. Okay, then who will provide this IP address to the browser? That is domain name server. Then what is domain name server? It keeps track of IP address and host name, or alternate definition is it converts IP address to the host name or host name to the IP address. Now first browser will check this IP address in the local DNS, for which path is /etc/host. Why browser will check this request in local DNS? Because for example, Ganesh is frequently accessing the website google.com, so that whole data will store in local DNS. So if local DNS do not have this IP address, then local DNS will talk to root name server for the IP address. Now root name server will identify the extensions like .com, .in, .org, and what is our extension here is .com. So this .com is our top level domain. That means root name server has identified our top level domains. Now root name server will forward request to the name server. Name server will identify the domain name. Like there can be the millions of websites with the extension .com. It can be google.com, facebook.com, instagram.com. Among these, which one is our website? google.com. So now name server has identified our domain name. The name server will forward this request to the stat of authority, and finally stat of authority will have the IP address. Then stat of authority will provide this IP address to the browser. Now browser has both IP address and host name. This one is our one part for DNS. Now moving to the next part. Before that, there is no need of part 2, but for simple understanding and make concept clear, we have made two parts of this DNS. Now moving to the next part. For example, if you go to the any mall or a company, who is the first guy that stop us and do our checking? That is security. Security will decide if we need to allow or deny to go to the mall or any company. Similarly, here also there is one concept called as firewall, which will allow or deny the request sent by the browser. Firewall will decide if the request sent by browser has to be accepted or denied. So let's assume that this is our server. This is our server. In this server, we will be using firewall. Let's assume that this is our firewall. Okay. Then what is the definition of firewall? Let's understand. What is firewall? It stops unauthorized access to the network. Access to the network. What is firewall? It stops unauthorized access to the network. Okay. Now browser is sending request to the server for the data he required. Like browser want to access the website google.com. So browser is sending request to this server. Browser is sending request to the server, but before moving this request forward, there is firewall who will decide to allow or deny request sent by the server. Firewall will decide to allow or deny the request. What is firewall? Firewall means it stops unauthorized access to the network. Now from if firewall allows this request, from firewall request will be moved to the web server, application server, and database server. As we have seen this web server, application server, and database server in 3-tier architecture. But the question is, can we use only one web server or only one application server or only one database server for here in the server? No, because google.com website can be accessed by multiple clients at the same time. So if you use only one web server, the server may get down. So we will be using here multiple web server, multiple application server, and multiple database server. This is because multiple clients can access the same website at the same time, so our server should not go down. That's why using multiple servers. For example, this is our web server, and this is our application server, and this is our database server. Okay, this is our web server, this is our application server, and this is our database server. Okay, now browser is sending request to this server. In the server we have firewall, which will allow or deny the request. From the firewall, the request will go to the web server. But now we are using here multiple web servers, multiple application server, and multiple database server. Then how this request will be sent to which web server or which application server? How we will be decide? There are multiple web server, then where our request will go? For that we are using one more concept here called as load balancer. So before web server, we are using here load balancer. This is our load balancer. Now what is the work of load balancer here? First understand what is load balancer. It distributes incoming network traffic across multiple servers. For example, now browser has sent request google.com, then firewall will forward the request to the load balancer. Now what load balancer will do? Load balancer will send first request to the first web server, second request to the second web server, okay, third request to the third web server. Now let's assume that browser has sent google.com request 5 requests at a one time. Then how load balancer will distribute this request? What load balancer will do? If browser has sent 5 requests, then load balancer will send first request to the first load balancer, second request to the second load balancer, third request to the third load balancer. And now we have only 3 web servers. Then where fourth request will go? The fourth request will go again to the first web server. Fifth request will go to the second web server. Sixth request will go to the third web server. Then again, if there is seventh request, then where load balancer will send seventh request to the first web server, and so on. It means if you have 3 web server, if browser send fourth request, then how load balancer will distribute? First request to the first web server, second to the second server, third to the third web server, then fourth request to the first web server, fifth request to the second web server, seventh request to the third web server, and so on. Okay, due to this load balance, if you use load balancer in our server, load balancer will distribute the incoming traffic so that there is no possibility of going our server down. So load balancer is necessity to use in our server. Then how this flows? If browser send request, then first firewall will decide if request has to be allowed or denied. Then what is firewall? It stop unauthorized access to the network. Then firewall will send request to the load balancer. Now load balancer will decide where to send this request, to the first web server or second web server or third web server. Then from web server request will go to the, now if first web server has request, then first web server will send request to the first web server, second web server to the second application server, and third web server to the third application server. If there is fourth request, then fourth request to the first web server, and from web server to the application server. Similarly here also, fifth request to the second web server, and from web server to the application server. Then application server will check the request in the database server, and database server will provide this request to the browser. Database request database server will provide request to the browser, and hence our domain name server works. This is the fully diagram of domain name server, how it works in the background. Let's understand from first. If browser is sending request google.com. Now browser has IP address and host name, then browser will send request to the firewall. Firewall will decide if request has to be allow or denied. What is firewall? It stops unauthorized access to the network. Then firewall will send request to the load balancer. Load balancer will distribute incoming network traffic across multiple servers. It means load balancer is sending first request to the first web server, second request to the second web server, third request to the third web server, fourth request to the first web server, fifth request to the second web server, sixth request to the third web server. And this whole process is known as round robin method. Like if load balancer is distributing its request to the multiple server, this process is called as round robin method. From web server, request will go to the application server. Application server will check request with database server, and database server will provide request to the browser. Now let's understand definitions what we have learned. What is firewall? It stops unauthorized access to the network. What is firewall? It stops unauthorized access to the network. Then what is load balancer? It distributes incoming network traffic across multiple servers. What is load balancer? It distributes incoming network traffic across multiple servers. And now we also learned that what is load balancer also here. Sorry, what is round robin method? What is round robin method? For example, if you have 3 web servers, then load balancer will send first request to the first web server, second request to the second server, third request to the third server, fourth request to the first web server. And this whole process is known as round robin method. If interviewer asks you what is round robin method in load balancer, then how you will explain him that if there are if there are 3 web servers, then load balancer will send first request to the first web server, second request to the second server, third request to the third server, fourth request to the first server, fifth request to the second server, and so on. This whole process is known as round robin method. So this is the whole concept of domain name server.